Are you taking this meeting from the LAPA, Justin?
No. I'm taking this meeting from the balcony.
Very nice.
I mean, the pool's looking a little green, unfortunately.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Got a rotor plot for a cleaner view.
Well, I quite like the natural approach. All right, how many people have we got on there, Raw?
We got 26 at the moment. So yeah, I think we're good to start.
Ahead.
All right. Just, do you want to introduce Craig?
Yes, thank you. Hi, good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us. And this is really a follow-up session to Sawan's overview of last week, and it's really going to concentrate on the on-water duties as well as some of the changes. So it's quite important for some of us that have been on the water recently, just to be aware of the changes that Craig's going to take us through. For many of you, you'll know Craig, of course. He's been doing this for a while, and also obviously really experienced as a POJ, and he has many talents. One of them is officiating at rowing. So we thank Craig for taking the time. Dylan will join us in about 10 minutes into the meeting, and we'll concentrate on the starting side of it, particularly with the updated system that we've been using for a few weeks now. So, I mean, firstly, thanks once again to everybody, and thanks to Craig and to Rory and to everybody else that's on. And over to you, Craig. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Justin. So, yeah, as Justin mentioned, this is a follow-up to last week's training by Selwyn, where he gave excellent content on all the rowing duty, all the officials' duties, and focused essentially on the rules. What I'll be doing tonight is a few things. The one is that there's a change to the start protocol, and that applies to starts whether they're electronic or they're the old flag-driven start. So we will look at that, and that's important. And then secondly, I'll be looking at when we're officiating on the water, how do we put into practice the things that Selwyn took us through last week. So, taking into account how the rows themselves are likely to behave, what impact the wind might have, and so on and so forth. So, we're going to try and move a little bit from theory into practice in the session tonight. What I'll be covering, just first some background, then the marshal, starter, aligner, the umpire and the pilot together with the umpire, and then we'll take any questions. So the principles, and this is a bit of revision on what Selwyn told us last week, are safety and fairness. And safety always comes before fairness. So as officials on the water, officials on the bank, doesn't matter where, we worry about safety and fairness. And safety always takes priority over fairness. So lives and life and limb is more important than a fair race. So the fairness definition, so from the rowers' perspective, they shall all compete fairly, showing respect for their opponents and the regatta officials. And in particular, they need to be on the start on time, and they need to follow the instructions of the officials at all times, whether the officials on or off the water. And the officials shall ensure the rules of racing are applied fairly and shall do so in an atmosphere of respect to all competitors. when we work together with the competitors, we see ourselves as one team, all with the same objectives, then things go a lot more smoothly. And we should try and avoid at all times to start escalation and name calling and so on and so forth. We should always be calm as officials, always polite, always show respect to the competitors. Right, now, so from a safety perspective, what is the most important thing we need to know before getting onto the water? Give you a moment to think about that. And what we need to know is what are the traffic rules for the water that we're about to get onto. So this is a slightly old version of the Rudderplaat course, and what it's got on it is all the traffic rules. So the competitors head up to the from the jetty to the start between lane 1 and the bank, and if they miss their race, they go down here in lane 9, the warm-up area is there, and so on and so forth. So the first thing to understand is that this will not be the only traffic rules for Rudderplaat. There will also be traffic rules for training, and those traffic rules for training will be different to the racing traffic rules and might well conflict with them. It's also the reason that we insist that the course is cleared half an hour prior to the start of a regatta, because if with these two conflicts, that creates a situation where we might get conflicts and have accidents. So yeah, so it's always important to know that. And just in this regard, I would also warn everybody that the current traffic rules, especially the training ones at Rudderplaat, are changing for the next few weeks due to the changes for Africa Champs at the beginning of November. So, yeah, always important to know what these are. They should be on a board at the at the water's edge, and it should also be in the program. And those two should also be congruent. If they're not, then it's as officials we should raise our hands and do something about it. So I will mention something last week about a crash, an accident we'd had at Wemib, and in that regard, the program and the board at the edge of the water were different, and that's exactly what we don't want to happen. Now, why do we say all of this, and why do we worry about the traffic rules? So let's just think about what happens when two boats collide head on. So if we think of an 8, the boat itself weighs about 100 kilos, the cock's up to 50. If you've got 8 rowers in it, and let's give them an average of 70 kilos each, so 8 sevens are 560 kilos plus the boat, that takes us to 660, plus the cocks to 710. You've got a loaded boat that weighs 3/4 of a ton. And if it's traveling at 20 kilometers an hour and hits another boat head on, then we are likely to have very serious injuries. That one that someone talked about last week, people ended up in hospital. In 1980 at the British Championships, people died. And so as officials, we really worry about these traffic rules. We cannot get onto the water unless we know what they are. Okay, just one thing for the coaches and also for the officials, on the bank. If a crew checks out but doesn't get on the water, we please ask the coaches and the masters in charge and whoever to please report this to Control Commission, because we've had the situation several times in the last few weeks that we're searching for a crew because we don't know where it is. It's missing on the water, and in fact, it's never boated, in the first place. So that's something that we should also watch out for. So let's just look at some of this in again. So so this is a slightly different course. This is VLC, and we can create a scenario that a crew is on its way to the start and it's here at the pump house, and that crew decides they're not able to race, whether it's because they have a breakage or somebody is sick or whatever. So what does this crew do? So they really have two alternatives. So they can row up across the start and back to the finish following these traffic rules. That's fine. There's no problem. If they are too sick to do so, or the boat is too broken to do so, then they have to put up their hand and wait for an official or for rescue to come and help them. What they are not allowed to do is just turn around and row against this traffic. We've seen that again a few times in the last few weeks. It's extremely dangerous because they are now rowing against the traffic here. And as we know, with rowing, we go backwards and people cannot see out of the back of their heads, and not every boat has a coxswain. But let's also look at another scenario. So we've had a finish, and the crew who's just finished the race wants to warm down after the race. Where do they go? So what they're likely to want to do is to row up this way, but we see here that channel is being used by crews returning if they've missed their race. So the only safe thing for those crews to do is to warm down back around the course and to follow these traffic rules. Again, we should ensure that crews do not row against the arrows on these water rules. Right, so we are going to start talking about the start and the marshal and the starter and the align in particular. So what we firstly want to think about at the start is to recognize this is a very important moment for the crew, for all the crews. They're likely to be a bit nervous and tense, and it's important that we enable them as much as possible by using professionalism and respect, calmness and accurate communication, and clear instructions to speak slowly and audibly when using the loudhailer, not have officials contradicting each other. And then we're going to talk later about a dedicated starter, but there are several advantages to this. One, that it gives us a calm and orderly start. And secondly, it allows the starter and the marshal to work together, which means that the umpire who follows the race can focus on positioning. Okay, so if there's any questions, please raise your hand and interrupt me. Okay, so let's look at the marshal. So again, just revising what Selwyn said last week, I'm not going to spend time on this. You check the crews and collect them into groups. You rack and stack them behind the umpire or the start tower. This is easier with umpires in position because you can use them as markers, and you move the crews forward as the space opens up. Don't let the crews drift too far from the start, this is especially at the 1,000 meters, and check that the crews adhere to the traffic pattern. Crews must not race through holding areas, and good marshalling can keep the regatta on time. Also, if the marshal sees crews who will violate the dress code, then please raise it with them. So we want to start not raising dress code at the 2 minutes and providing crews with yellow cards. If we see it in time to avoid that situation, we should raise it. Now, it's not always possible. Some crews will be wearing warm-up tops and so on and so forth. Well, then, just ignore that. But if we see a crew which is violating the dress code, then let's just try and be a little bit proactive about that. So, right, let's get to some scenarios from a marshalling perspective. So,
you had a hand there?
Yes, hi, sorry, Craig, it's Carol here. Just regarding that, I mean, how will that help them getting a yellow card if the marshal talks to them? The umpire's not going to know. They're still going to yellow card them potentially.
Yeah, so I think it's situational. I mean, this is a request from SAROC that we added this in. But if they've got plenty of time, maybe another crew can bring it up for them. I don't know. There's plenty of scenarios. The other thing is, and we'll see it later when it comes to dress, some of the poorer schools can't afford uniform dress for everybody, and then we can sort that out then as well.
I think just for clarity, I think it's about being proactive about things they can control. If they're all wearing different hats, they can take them off. If they're wearing different shirts, they can take them off. Obviously, no one expects them to swim back and get the stuff they forgot, but what you don't want is hitting the 2-minute mark, they're all wearing different hats, and then they get a yellow card for it. If we can proactively remove that stress, much easier for everyone involved.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's come back to the scenario. So we've got a 1,000-meter race at Rudderplaat. The wind is blowing from this direction. What is likely to happen here in the holding area? What's likely to happen is that the crews in the holding area will all blow into the bay here with consequences that are not desirable. So firstly, what will happen is the marshal and potentially rescue are distracted from their major role. So other things that need to get done don't get done. It causes delays. The crew may miss their race, and the crew may get stuck on the rocks. Or rescue might get stuck on the rocks. We had that a few weeks ago, where rescue had to try and pull some of these boats off the bank, but they couldn't get in because there are rocks in the way and their motor is too deep. So this is something we want to avoid. So what should happen instead of this? Okay, so what should happen is that the crews are facing into the wind. So they've got their bows into the wind, and in this attitude, it is very easy for the crews to maintain position. If they blow slightly backwards, all they do is they just touch up a few times and they get back to where they are. I think it's important to understand that racing shells are highly optimized for going forward fast. Okay? They can only make gradual turns when going forward. Going backwards is hard, especially for very junior crews, and moving sideways is impossible. So as marshals and umpires, we have to be aware of the dynamics of the boats on the water when we make decisions and when we marshal crews and give them instructions. Okay, now if we look at the situation at the start, how will it differ between a junior regatta, or, which is under 14s and under 15s, and a junior and senior regatta, which has got opens and under 16s who might be racing down from 2,000 meters? So, where is a junior regatta, or there's no more 2,000-meter races for a long time, then we can rack and stack the crews to any depth that we want to. Preferably with the umpires' boats in between here, but sometimes the umpires are all on the course and they haven't got there, so the marshal can just still provide these crews in these lines. What's important is to leave enough room between the crews here for the next race, which is the previous race has just gone off, to leave enough room for final straightening before the start line. Going back to what we said, boats cannot move sideways. If these crews were at the start line, the wind is blowing here, there's some minutes to the start. By the time the start arrives, they will all be in the aligner's boat. So it's important, especially when there's wind here, but also when we're using floating starts, for these crews not to be too close to the start line. Also, if the wind is from this direction, the crews in this race, which will be next to go, should be on the right-hand side of their lanes, or even tilted slightly like these ones here are, which allows them to move up and retain position without blowing into a different lane. These crews here, further back, they should be compensating for the wind by pointing, into it like that. And when they come onto the course, they should row perpendicularly onto the course and then spin into their lane. And a good marshal can keep all of these crews together like this. This makes life very easy for the umpires, and allows the regatta to proceed in an orderly way. Going back to what we said, if we've got crews stuck here in the, having been blown into the bay, and the marshal is busy with them, and then this bit here gets disorderly, etc., then everything breaks down. So if we can keep this order going, then everything is easier and more calm. If we've got a junior and senior regatta, then these crews here cannot go onto the course until the previous 2,000 meter course race has gone by. So once that race has gone by, then these crews here can start moving onto the course. So they should have been collected in race order over here. We don't want them too far down the course, because then it'll take them forever to get to the start line. But as marshals, we should just try and collect them together here in race order. And when the umpire gives the go-ahead, then you can move these crews onto the course. This thing's just gone on a go slow strike. Oh man.
Are you just trying to advance it to slide 22, Craig?
Well, slide 22 is hidden. I'm trying to get to slide 23. Okay. So unfortunately, what we've got is that the mechanism I was using to share is no longer available. So I'm going to just stop sharing, and I'm going to share in a different way. What that means is that I will not be able to see if there's any hands up, etc. So if somebody can help me with that, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sure, I'll keep an eye.
Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the starter. The starter is not normally positioned behind the start like this, with the liner here on the start line, and the umpire behind the starter, preferably not so far to the side. It should be in the middle of the course. Right. So the starter, or the umpire, if the umpire is doing the starter's duties, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail as we go. Firstly, should check WhatsApp for changes to cruise and schedule. Okay? So if there's late entries, there's changes to stroke names, there's scratchings, and so forth. Then the next thing is that the 2-minute rule should be applied by the starter. So 2 minutes before the race, the crews should be ready to race. The race should be started at race time. We award yellow cards, warning for crews arriving after 2 minutes to go. And we inform crews carrying a warning. That's a yellow card into the race. Now, that might not only be for late at the start, it might be for a traffic violation or some other thing, but or some other violation. But it is the starter that informs the crews. The starter also checks the dress code, and the starter only starts the race when the course is clear. When the previous race has progressed sufficiently, it is a very upsetting situation if we have one race rowing through the previous race. So we need to be careful of that. If we've got a fast 8s race behind a slow sculls race, leave lots and lots of space. We've got a slow sculls race proceeding after a fast 8s race, then you hardly need to wait at all. But what we absolutely want to avoid is races rowing through each other. It complicates the judge at the finisher's life considerably. It can be a safety hazard. It could affect the fairness of the race, etc., etc. So that's something that we try and avoid at all costs. We can only start the race once all crews are present, if it's before the race start time. Okay? But if it's before the race start time and the crews are all present, and especially if it's hot and uncomfortable, then we can consider starting early. Normally, we would ask the crews whether they consent to that happening. And then we only start the race when the assistant, which would either be the pilot or the starter's assistant, has completed calling in the race. So let's look at dress code. So the tri-suits must be the same. So just be careful when the uniform is changed. That might create some ambiguity there. We also need to be sensitive. Some schools cannot afford uniforms. We can give a warning, yellow card at 2 minutes, but it's better to address this proactively prior to the start. So, if there's going to be a headdress violation, for instance, just tell the crew, before the 2 minutes to sort out their headgear. So hats, those worn must be the same. This excludes religious headgear, which can differ. You don't have to wear a hat. So you can have some crew members with hats and some without. That's okay. And you can also mix hats and peaks, providing they are uniform in design and style. So for undershirt and leggings, they need to be a neutral color, not to compromise the racing uniform. And they cannot be all different. But sunglasses are not controlled. Right, then the next thing, this question comes up quite a lot. What happens if a crew suffers a breakage prior to the start? So that's Rule 5.7.1. If a crew sustains any damage to its boat or equipment on the way to the start or in any designated holding area, the crew can bring this to the attention of the umpire. So after having examined the damage and in consultation with the president of the jury, the umpire shall decide on an appropriate course of action that could include rejecting the claim, effecting repairs, or delaying the start of the race. So what this tells us is that it's situational. So the action we take is situational. If a boat on the way to the start had been rowed into by another boat, or even worse, had been the umpire's boat had caused a collision or whatever, so the breakage is not the fault of the crew, then obviously we would be highly lenient. If the crew needs a spanner and can fix the boat on the water, and the marshal has a spanner and can provide it, and the crew can still get to the start on time, then there's, that's the obvious thing to do. If we've got a situation where we've got multiple heats at a championship regatta, and it's a schools champs, so some of those heats are decided on time, and we're getting to the fourth heat out of 6, and the crew has damage to the boat, and it's a maintenance issue rather than anything else, then we're unlikely to be lenient to that crew, because by delaying the start of that heat or moving it to later, then the conditions might well change, and then the progression based on time could get different. So it's really important that we understand, when making these decisions, what the impact is, what the cause of the damage is, and what is fair not only to this crew, but to the rest of the crews in the race. Right, so the start protocol. So this is where things get new. So the objective here, the objective in the memo from Sarok is for crews to experience a smooth and standardized approach to the start. And this is irrespective of whether we're using the new electronic start systems or whether we're using flags. Okay, so as a result of that, we've got a slightly new concept. We've got a separation of something called the invite onto the course and the roll call. So what's the invite onto the course? So when the course is clear, probably 5 minutes prior to the starter invites crews onto the course. How does the starter invite crews onto the course? The starter announces the race details, the lane number, crew, and stroke name. So this is what we tend to do today anyway. So it would be something, for instance, crews for race number 63, November, lane number 1, St. Stithians, Smith, lane number 2, St. Andrews, Jones, etc., etc. Then the starter announces the minutes to the start. So 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2, down to 3 minutes. And then immediately prior to the 2-minute start, then the roll call will take place. So the starter does this formal roll call prior to handing over to the aligner, and only crew names are used. So you would, in the previous example, get St. Stithians, St. Andrews, and so forth. So this is new, it's different, and we need to put it into practice. Sarok is very keen that all the provinces implement this uniformly, and we'll see now the nuances of doing this between when the umpire is doing the starting, or when we're using the new electronic start. And one thing to note, it is the starter that calls out the number of minutes to the start, not the aligner. We had some issues last weekend where the aligner was calling out the minutes to the start, and this was differing from the starter. And this, again, going back to something we said earlier, we do not want to give conflicting commands to crews. So when the umpire is the starter, here's the protocol. When the course is clear, announce the race. Yes, and that's the invite onto the course, and marshal the crews. Conduct the roll call immediately prior to the 2 minutes. At the 2 minutes, move the flag to the ready position. So the ready position is what we know with the red flag here, out horizontal. Once we do that, that instructs the aligner to commence aligning. Note that the over to you, Mr. Aligner, or over to you, aligner, this verbal hand over to the aligner no longer exists on the flag start. This brings it into line with the electronic start where the orange light starts flashing. Once the starter has held out the red flag, then everybody in the start area is to be quiet and not move. The starter will then wait for the aligner's white flag, and the aligner will call hold it all crews. The starter should check that the crews are straight. So if you've got skew crews and you start, then you're likely to have a clash, and this leads to even further delays. Much better to get the crews to be straight. It's also not essential to check for raised hands, but it's good etiquette to do so, and good practice to do so. So if there is a problem, we should know what it is. We don't have to listen to it, if it's not valid. But if it is valid, then we don't want repercussions later. And then, after the start, check that the aligner does not call a false start. So let's look at this in a little bit more detail on the water. So let's come back to the scenario I was using earlier. So the previous race has gone off. There's the umpire. I've used a U for the umpire. I've used this yellow dot here to indicate where the yellow boys are on Rotterplaat. So we've got, as these races are going off, all these crews are moving up, preferably behind the umpire, but if the umpire isn't there, moving up anyway. Now, once that race goes off, these crews must not move towards the start. They need to stay stationary until the umpire announces the race. Okay. Where things go right on the existing system is that some of these crews decide that they should move to the start line, and the umpire is distracted by something else. There's one of these crews is late or stuck or has got a breakage or whatever, and then the umpire looks around, and two of these crews are here on the start line. And that is a very bad situation, especially in the wind, because now these crews are the rest of the crews are going to arrive late, and these crews will be out of position, and then it's nearly impossible to get the start to work. Especially in wind, these crews must all come up together. Now, what's also important here is that these crews aren't too far back and they aren't too far forward. We need to have enough space for them to get straight and get into their lanes before they get to the start line, but not so far back here that it takes them 5 minutes to touch to the start line. In reality, they could rush full strokes to get to the start line, but in practice, when I've called that in the past, they still just touch up very slowly as if they're just about to approach it. Okay, so to come back to this, these crews do not move until the umpire finishes announcing the race and tells them to start moving. Now, of course, why do we say that? The umpire marshals the crews from here on in because some of these crews might be might not just be here, they might be a little bit behind, so we've got to get them into order and get them moving up towards the start. Then with 2 minutes to go, they should be at just the right distance to the start line for the aligner to easily align them, but also far enough away that they still have space to get in, keep straight in their lanes and all arrive together. And what we emphasize, both as the umpire and the aligner, that these crews should move up together. Again, just 2 weeks ago, we had like 6 of these crews moving up together and one laggard here. And by the time this laggard arrived, then these crews had blown off, etc., etc. Keep these crews together and don't let them approach the start line if you've got one lagging behind. Bring them all up together. Yeah, so now we're in the right position at 2 minutes prior to the start. If the course is clear, the umpire calls 2 minutes and gets into the ready position. Having already done the roll call, we said that's done immediately prior to the 2 minutes, and then the aligner can start aligning. Okay, so with the electronic start, the protocol. So when the course is clear, announce the race. So that's the invite onto course, very similar to the flags or to the umpire. Ensure that all the correct crews are in the race. That's why we announce the race. Call the crews to the start. And to do that, you use the pre-start loud hailer. At each minute, announce the number of minutes to the start. So that's 5 down to 3. Conduct the formal roll call immediately prior to the 2 minutes and award any yellow cards. Confirm that the umpire is ready. So this is important. The starter confirms that the umpire is ready. The umpire doesn't play a part in the start, but the umpire has to be ready before the starter can call 2 minutes. And then the yellow light goes on and the aligner starts. So there are these next few things Dylan is going to go into, these next few points in more detail. So I'm not going to go through them here. So this is just here for completeness. Then the one thing I do want to emphasize is this last point here. If the equipment fails, fall back to flags. But when we fall back to flags, we've got to communicate to the aligner, to the judge at the finish, to the POJ, and to the crews. This is not a secret. You know, people are not seances. They cannot divine this stuff. We have to tell them. And then keep flags for the rest of the specific event for consistency. So if the equipment's failed and there's 6 heats in the race, then we keep the flags up until the end of the sixth heat before reverting back to the electronic start. So Dylan, I'm going to hand over to you. Just tell me when you want me to advance the slides.
Okay, great. Let me maybe just go through the actual process with the buttons, and then we'll just talk to maybe the device. Evening, everybody. Sorry, can we just go back, Craig, to the previous slide? Oh, okay, you've put it all here. Right, no, great. So let's maybe, okay, sorry, I'll see what you've done. Can we just maybe go to what the unit looks like? So the unit does look a little bit intimidating, but it's really easy. You basically need a finger to push one of 4 buttons or 5 buttons, depending what you're doing. I think the key thing to note is that when you switch on the unit, there is a guide in the box. Just ensure that you follow the guide. I think the key challenge is the AP unit needs to be on. There's a little red button at the top. Just make sure that that is depressed before you actually switch the unit on, and most of your problems go away. When you press any of the buttons, quite a few things happen. So, for example, if you push the yellow button, there's a light that will come on when the aligner pushes the white button on their remote. It will, there's a little white light that's controlled by the aligner that comes on, that signals to you that you can go through the start process. If you push the red button, obviously, then it will switch off the orange light, the strobe light, and it will switch on the red light that the athletes can see. And then when you push the green button, which we'll get to on the next slide, it will put the green light on, it will sound the beep, and it will send the pinger through if you've connected the pinger. So it will do a lot of things, and it really does afford you a lot more time to look at what the crews are doing. If there's a false start, obviously that is up to the aligner to decide, but obviously you've just got to watch. So you can override and push the false start button if you see there's a challenge with the system, at which point it sort of goes into a beeping mode, and it's quite clear that the athletes need to stop. I can't remember the exact process. We did test it on the weekend. Just maybe go to the next slide, Craig, and I'll go through the actual process.
No, sorry, Dylan, just before we do that, you mentioned that before turning the power on, it was important to press something else, but where's that button?
Yeah, so at the top, if you look, sorry, if you put the points on there where your mouse is, that button there it must be clearly depressed. So basically before you switch the unit on, it just gives you less hassles when you're trying to sync it to the unit that the starter has. That's really the only catch. If you're connecting all the cables, it only fits in one place. It's really really intuitive when you set it all up. I think the only thing that we've really had some challenges with is with connecting the pinger, but that seems to be more the positioning of the pinger and nothing to do with the device itself. So, for example, when you push the green button, everything sounds, you can hear the pinger has done its thing, but they're not receiving in the tower. That is not the fault of this unit at all. That's to do with the aerial and how you've positioned the aerial. So it's very intuitive.
Okay, thanks. So just for avoidance of ambiguity, you hold this red button in.
No. So you just push it in so it's depressed. So it's either depressed or out. Just
Okay.
make sure it's depressed. Typically, nobody touches it, so it's just something to be aware of if you aren't able to sync to the handheld unit.
Okay, good.
Cool. Okay, so for the actual start protocol, so at 2 minutes, obviously, if everything's ready and you've got an umpire, the starter would announce 2 minutes to start, and you press the yellow button. What the yellow button will do is it will put the strobe on, so that signals then to both the crews and the Alana that you've got 2 minutes to start. We were testing on the weekend. If you position the light correctly, you can see it pretty much at the 2K mark. At the finish, all the way up to the 2K mark, and it is quite useful if you're trying to figure out what's on the course. There is no over to you Alana, so everything is done with the lights. It is a little bit different. I think we have been sort of speaking a lot over the last couple of weeks, and my observation is it does confuse the athletes. So the trick is just to adjust to only using the radio if there's a problem. The Alana will align. The Alana does not say hold it all crews when they are ready, right? So once the Alana is happy that all the crews are aligned, the Alana will press a white button on the unit that they have, or raise the white flag as a backup when the crews are aligned, right? So there are a couple of bugs that we're working through. Gordon, I'll come to your statement just now. Once that has been done, the starter will say all crews. There will be a notable pause. You will say attention, and then you press the red button. That will then switch the red light on the lights, and then you will wait anything from 1 to 5 seconds, and you will then press the green button. When you press the green button, the light comes on. The horn sounds, or it's like a tweet that sounds. It is very, very clear. It will also start the pinger. So if you've got the pinger connected, it will ping the finish tower. And on the actual unit itself, Craig, maybe go back to the previous slide, it will start a backup timer. So on the actual screen, I can't remember if it's the top or the bottom. I think the one is the time, so you know exactly what the time is. We should have a picture of it on. And then what it will do is when you start the race, it will actually start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That is the time from when you actually started the press the green button. That time will reset when you press the yellow button. So it will just keep counting until you go through the next start sequence. It's very useful. We had an issue on the weekend. We did a countdown within a minute. There was no stress. It was very, very clear what was going on. So it's a very nifty little feature on the unit. Craig, just go back to the process, sorry. If there is a false start, only the Alana can decide, right? So obviously the starter can override. They do have a false start button, but the false start is for the Alana to decide. What they will do is they'll press the red button and then just raise the red flag as a backup, just in case we have a communication challenge between the two units. What will then happen is the beeper will beep sort of continuously, and the lights will flash. So it is very clear to everybody on the course that there was a false start. And that's it. It's nice and easy. I just want to check Gordon's comments. So, yeah. So, Gordon, there are a couple of bugs that we have noticed. I've sent Selwyn a message. We are busy troubleshooting them and trying to figure out exactly what the issue is. But typically what we are noticing is that the units can sometimes fail in the communication, and we don't quite know what's causing it. So when the Alana presses the white button, 9 out of 10 times you get the white light. Sometimes you don't, right? So what Denise and I were doing on the weekend, she would just use the flag, she would push the button, and we would then control everything from the unit. As I've said, I'm sort of going to chat to Selwyn about this and just try and see if we can emulate what's causing the problem, because then we can obviously fix it. We have noticed that if you use the umpire's radio too close to the unit, I like breaking things, so this is definitely not any reflection of the usefulness of the unit. The device will reset. So if you're in a start sequence and you hold the radio over the device, there is no guarantee what it's going to do. We are working to just try to figure out exactly what emulates the issue so we can prevent that. When you, as I mentioned earlier, when a new start sequence is initiated, the backup time from the previous race is lost. So if you're worried, inclement weather, or you've been having some challenges with the system or the pinger, before you start the next sequence and you are worried, just confirm with the finish tower that they've got the start. We only had one incident since we've been using the system where we have to call in the backup time, but I think it's just useful to be aware of that. As I highlighted earlier with Craig, the WPS access button must be on before you turn the device on. It is labeled on the unit. It is quite clear. And then something that I was corrected on the weekend, and I think it's just useful to note, is that when you put the strobe light onto the tower, the strobe light needs to be positioned horizontally. Well, I suppose how you debate it, which is why I've put the pictures there. So either the light facing up or the light facing down. You can then pretty much see it from anywhere on the course, as well as from behind the tower. Those are the sort of the nuances that we've identified so far, but we will raise these with Selwyn once we can get some repeatability in them. Any questions or comments? Yeah, cool. Thanks, Craig.
Okay, thanks, Dylan. So let's just practically look at what that means on the rotor plot course. So here we've got the start tower, here we've got the aligner, there's the start line, here are the white buoys. So the Marshall racks and stacks from the white buoys. Okay. The starter announces the race, tells the crews how many minutes to the start, and awards any yellow or red cards. The crews can proceed in their lanes to the start side of the tower. There's no point in them being here once the race has been announced. The starter proceeds with a formal roll call and awards any last-minute yellow cards. The assistant starter calls in the race on the radio, and the starter calls 2 minutes. The umpire normally plays no part at the start. So when we first had the start tower, we had all sorts of things happening. The umpire handing over to the starter, the umpire holding out a red flag, all sorts of things. Hopefully those have all gone away. But in the absence of the marshal, the umpire can assist by ensuring that the crews are at the white buoys on time. And then finally, the umpire starts from behind the crews, unless it's physically impossible. So some courses there isn't space for the umpire to come in behind. So that's the one reason the umpire might come in from the side. Or it can be at the POJ's discretion. So if you've got a regatta that's running late, if you're short of umpires, they're always on the course and coming back up to the start. There's only 2 crews in the race. Then potentially the starter with the accession of the POJ can start the race. Remember, as the starter, you have to get the umpire's consent before starting the race. So we've had situations where a start was done and the umpire was still at the 1500 meter mark. That's not, the umpire didn't feel that they were in control of their race and so forth. So this at POJ's discretion is hopefully only used in rare circumstances, but again, it's situational. Under normal circumstances, the umpire starts from behind the crews. Now let's look at the aligner. Okay, so if the aligner is using a white flag, the flag should be held down, not sort of half waving around, etc., etc. This is a change from the protocol of like 10 years ago where that white flag was held horizontally. Just hold it down and out of sight. Do the aligning. So best to call the lane number first before calling touch or back. So you would call the lane number, touch back in the distance. If we're on a floating start, you're likely to be calling things like half a length, a quarter of a length, quarter of a canvas, etc. If you're on a start with pontoons, you'll be calling much finer distances, like 3 bow walls or whatever. Then again, on a floating start, you wouldn't use these when there's pontoons, but you might say let it run. So the crews are approaching the start. They're a little bit out of alignment, and so you tell the crews to let it run. And also because a boat will not stop instantly. A boat takes some distance to stop. So if the crew's approaching and is going to overrun the start, long before they get to that situation, tell them to stop rowing. And you tell them to stop rowing by saying, let it run. And if they are now really close to the start, say hold. Remember, even when you tell them to hold, they're still going to move like probably a canvas or half a canvas, depending on how fast they're going, or to hold it hard. Then check that the starter or the umpire are ready. If they've turned around or their motorboat is broken or whatever, then there's no point in completing the alignment. Then indicate that the boats are aligned by pressing the white button, so that's on the electronic start, or raising the white flag and calling hold it all crews. So on the electronic start, the aligner has a device like this one here, and it's got a white button and a red button. The white button is that the crews are aligned. The red button is for a false start, and it also has the race time on this device. Then the aligner checks for false starts. And if there's a false start, then obviously you press the false start button, or you raise the red flag and turn on the siren if you've got one, and so forth. And then just also remember what we said earlier. Boats don't stop immediately. Boats can't move sideways, and be quick with your instructions. And and then just in terms of this, when you press if we're using electronic timing, we don't the electronic start. We just press the white button. We don't call hold at all crews. Okay, so the assistant aligners duties. So update the program as necessary. The aligner is sometimes busy, so you can help with that. Press the electronic start button if it's available. So that's the pinger. Start the stopwatch for every race, and so that the aligner is the first port of call on a flag start if the start has been missed by the finish tower. The finish tower will ask the aligner first. Now, from this perspective, Carol made a very good point last year. She says, if you're on the water and you see a start about to go off, and take out a stopwatch and take that start, just in case somebody misses it. And there are plenty of situations where you can do that. If you're the umpire for the next race, after the one that is about to be started, it's very easy for you to take a time. It's actually quite hard if the aligner doesn't have an assistant for the aligner who's doing a flag start to actually get the start time. You've got to hold the stopwatch and the flag in the same hand. And you've got to be pretty dexterous to do that, and it's easy to miss it. And it's quite hard for the motorboat pilot to take a start, because you're trying to hold the radio open. You need to depress the to depress the accelerator to keep the umpire in touch with the cruise, etc. Okay, so the aligner will then pass the time to the time box should the start be missed, and we always do that by counting down to the next minute. So preferably to the first minute. So you say, yeah, I'll give you one minute, which is in 30 seconds time, and I'll start calling at 50, and then you call 50, 51, yeah, up until you get there. Mark the crews off as they arrive at the start and manage the radio communications. Then some notes for the aligner. The crews must be aligned properly. So this is especially for senior and A events, which really important in these critical high-profile events for the crews to be aligned properly. But of course, there is a degree of pragmatism which is required. If we're aligning junior 14C crews in a howling crosswind and so forth, then aiming for perfect alignment isn't something sensible. When you take your boat out to go to the aligner station, make sure you've got spare rope in the boat, so tie the boat in position. And it's not useful to arrive at the aligner station and not have the ability to tie up the motorboat. Tie equipment, so this should be to the aligner station and to the boat in case it falls overboard. So if you're aligning from a boat, which sometimes happens, to tie it down. And don't leave a boat unmanned, so the crews may row into it. I think some of these are a little bit dated, based on what we have now. The rolling start. So this can only be used when the umpire and starter's duties have been combined. So it can't be used on the electronic start. It's typically used where we've got inexperienced crews in bad weather. The umpire calls the crews to start, and very similarly to what we had with the floating start, the umpire marshals the crew so that they're in line abreast and none are far ahead or far behind. Tells them to row down together. The umpire holds out the red flag, so in the ready position. The aligner calls crews to catch up or slow down. That's obviously once the crews are in earshot, can hear the aligner. If you're further behind, then the umpire will do that prior to holding out the red flag, which is the indication for the aligner to take over. When all the crews are close to the start line, the aligner, without stopping the crews, raises the white flag and utters the command, prepare to race. Then the umpire calls attention, go, with no pause. And what's really important when we look at a rolling start is that if in any one event there are multiple heats, we have to use the same protocol start for all the heats in the event. So if we've started with one static start, all of those heats have to be on a static start. If we start with a rolling start, then all the remaining heats have to have a rolling start. And if we the first heat with a rolling start, we have to inform the next umpire to do a rolling start, and then so on. That umpire informs the next umpire, and so forth. So we've given you a lot of information. So let's just summarize it by comparing the electronic start versus the umpire as the starter or the flag start. So in terms of announcing the race, awarding yellow cards, calling the roll, etc., with the electronic start, it's the starter. With the umpire as starter, it's the umpire. Prior to the roll call, with the electronic start, the starter checks that the umpire is ready. It's obviously not applicable if the umpire is the starter. The aligner starts aligning at 2 minutes. With the electronic start, when the yellow strobe light goes on. With the umpire as starter, when the umpire's red flag is horizontal. So we're getting an echo there. Can people go on mute? Thanks. When the crews are aligned on the electronic start, the aligner presses the white button. On the umpire starter, the aligner white flag is raised and hold it all crews is called. Now, with the start, on the electronic start, you call all crews. That all crews actually takes the place of this hold it all crews. You pause, then call attention and turn on the red light. Then you pause for 1 to 5 seconds and press the green button. With the umpire as starter, we've had the hold it all crews being called by the aligner. We call attention, we pause for 1 to 5 seconds, then go. With a false start, the aligner presses the false start button while the green light is on. So that's within the first 10 seconds. That's with the electronic starting. With the umpire as starter, the aligner waves a red flag and initiates an audible alarm. In both cases, the umpire is, may need to also wave a red flag and bellow through the loudhailer to get the crews to stop rowing. Okay, any questions on this starter? Okay, then I'm going to move to the umpire.
Sorry, Craig, Mark had a question. I think that's worth sort of maybe clarifying. So just can we confirm or deny that the starter at the 2000 meter is in charge of the race for the first 100 meters to call clashes, stop rowing, etic?
Okay, so yes, good question. The starter is not in control of the race. The starter's duties end when the green button is pressed, unless there is a false start. The umpire is, from that moment onwards, takes control of the race. The starter does not call clashes or anything else. Okay, now there is one slight exception to that. So that's if, in that special circumstance that we mentioned earlier, where the umpire might come in from the side at the POJ's request because the regatta is running late and we're short of umpires and we're struggling to get them back to the start on time, and the starter starts the race. The starter might have a better view of what's going on in the course for that first 100 meters or so until the umpire can move in, especially as the umpire cannot see where the crews are in relation to their lane, etc. So then the starter can call it. But again, we try and avoid those situations where we can. But in principle, the starter does not deal with those sorts of issues. The umpire deals with them. Is that unambiguous? Okay. So the umpire is responsible for the conduct of the race, other than those duties specifically allocated to the starter and aligner. And again, you haven't seen anywhere where we've mentioned the starter that the starter calls out crews who's steering skew, etc., etc. The umpire obviously has to understand the traffic rules and the local rules as are published in the regatta notice and displayed at the venue. Check all the equipment supplied and review the radio protocol. And our golden rule is that row safety is our main concern, and each competitor must be afforded an equal chance of winning. Okay. So, okay. So after the command go, immediately follow the crews in the middle of the course. Instruct the pilot on boat positioning, normally with hand signals, and ensure that the white flag is used unless the race is to be stopped. So with the umpires, after you started the race, make sure that none of your flags are showing, because that could cause confusion. And then when we are in danger of a clash or so forth, and we need to tell a crew to move over, we use the white flag. And it's only if we're stopping a race that we use the red flag. So we use the red flag at the start, and if there's a problem, a major problem. Otherwise, we use the white flag. What we also need to do is keep all crews clear from the wake. But there are some exceptions to that. If there's a safety issue, then if we create a wake in order to save a life, then that's what we do. If there's going to be, or there's a risk of a clash in the medal positions, and we've got one crew or two crews trailing far behind, then the umpire needs to move up, and we'll watch those crews. It's just unfortunate. The umpire needs to watch the crews behind your boat. And I've already said, don't show a flag when it's not being used. So no flapping crews. Okay. So crews are allowed to leave their lanes. Okay. As long as this does not interfere with other boats or create an unfair advantage. Okay. So you can't leave your lane and interfere with other boats. We'll go through that in some detail in a few minutes. So don't steer a crew unless it's affecting another crew who is in its own water or there's an obstruction. So if a crew is told to stop rowing, you can tell them to continue. So crew, continue rowing. And actually, if you've told them to stop, you should have used the crew name stop rowing. No point in just calling stop rowing, because then you might stop the whole race by mistake. So where you want to stop just an individual crew, you call the crew name and stop rowing, and the crew name and continue rowing. Okay, so if you need a crew to move, you call the crew and show the direction in which it's to move. So here you hold up the white flag, you call the crew name, and then you drop the white flag in the direction that you need the change to happen. You can also use keep apart. So two crews are both approaching the lane barrier between themselves. It's a good idea to tell them to keep apart. They're both equally at fault. And then remember the safety of crews and boats. So what do we mean by that? So we're at Rudderplaat, and we've got crews rowing down, and the crew in lane 1 starts to move outside the course. Now remember, lane 1 has got a safety lane next to it, and then after the safety lane, they will be rowing against crews coming to the start. That is a safety hazard. We have to get that crew back onto the course, and if they're not capable of steering back onto the course, we have to tell them to stop rowing. Okay, that's very important. The other thing to be aware of is if the crew has moved into the safety lane between the 2000 and the 1000, that the aligner station at 1000 is in the safety lane. So aligners at 1000, please keep a lookout for crews who might be approaching you. Now, why do I say that? Why isn't the umpire doing that? Well, the umpire is probably doing that, but sometimes when you're umpiring, things go wrong when more than one thing happens at once. So you've got a crew in lane 8, which has turned turtle, and you're worried, and you've gone to investigate that, and then this crew in lane 1 goes into the safety lane and is heading towards the aligner's station. In those situations, the aligner, please be aware, and any other official on their way to the start or whatever, if that crew has now moved into a situation where it's rowing against the traffic on the way to the start, please control that crew if the umpire is distracted by something else. We look at these rules and these guidelines, and it's very easy and it looks very clinical and so forth. But the reality is things go wrong when more than one thing happens at once. And so we need to support each other in that way. But if the umpire is not distracted and is in charge, please don't give conflicting commands to crews. That doesn't help either. Okay. So, stopping a race. If a fair race is not possible, and this can be anywhere on the course, you stop the race by waving a red flag. And you sound the siren or a bell and you call out stop rowing. So once you've stopped a race, you cannot restart a race halfway down the course, except for the boat race, which won't apply here in 2,000-meter racing. So you either move the crews back to the start to restart immediately, or you check with the POJ for a new start time. Again, that will be situational. It depends on why you had to stop the race and so forth. But in principle, it's best to stop the race immediately before the incident occurs. There's no point if something happens at the 1750-meter mark waiting till the finish and then deciding, because by then everything is going to get political. You're going to have upset people. There's likely to be objections and protests and appeals and all sorts of things. Rather take all of that off the table. Just stop the race, take the crews back to the start, and get going again. Okay. Now, obviously, when you take the crews off the course and you send them back to the start, you have to be careful. Let's not have collisions while we're doing that, and we need to adhere to the traffic patterns, going back to the start. So the umpire at the finish. So we look out for medical conditions. We wait 10 to 15 seconds to determine if an objection is raised. If an objection is raised, ascertain the reason for the objection. So listen to the crew and do not assume. It's very easy to assume the wrong thing here. Then you can uphold or overrule the objection. You advise the crew of the decision. Now, in coming to this decision, you don't have to do it yourself. You've got a pilot next to you whose opinion you can ask, and you can also consult with relevant officials should that be required. So you might need to ask the judge at the finish what order the crews finished in. And if it's a master's race which goes on prognosis and handicap times, that might be quite a complicated question. Anyway, you eventually reach a decision. This decision needs to be reached with a crew still on the water. So when there's an objection, immediately tell the crews to wait around, not to head back to the jetty. Now, it can happen that by the time the umpire gets to the finish, because there have been laggard crews or you've been dealing with a safety issue, so some crew is turned over or whatever, that those crews are well on their way to the jetty, then please the officials on the bank assist by ensuring that those crews don't get off the water. Okay, so but once the umpires reach the decision, you advise the POJ of the decision, and you never ask the POJ for advice. Then one thing to be aware of if there's been no objection, but the umpire believes the race wasn't fair, then the umpire can take that action without an objection. You raise the red flag, and you can then go and talk to the crews and make a decision. So the umpire can exclude a crew or take other action, even if there is no objection. Okay, so the pilot needs to be there early to get the boat on the water, should have a stopwatch. This is not safety equipment that the pilot should just have one. On board, we should have life jackets, a paddle, a bailer, a torpedo, or other flotation to assist crews in the water. Take up a backup time if possible, especially for heat. We've already spoken about that. And be careful of wake. Go up the middle of the course. So when we're returning to the start, we need to go up the middle of the course at full speed. Okay. And then come to a complete stop 300 to 500 meters ahead of the oncoming race. And then, and it's important to get that complete stop, because if you turn before the boat has settled down into the water, then you create wake which rides up the course. And then we idle slowly off the course and wait for the race to pass. Okay. Now, why do we go up the middle of the course? Because if we go up the middle of the course, the wake from the umpire's boat dissipates evenly off the edge of the course. And let's understand that the wake, once it reaches the bank, will completely dissipate. So it doesn't reflect off the bank. So our best situation, in going back to the start, is in the middle of the course. It causes the least problems and the least wake overall, on the course. The pilot is the umpire's second pair of hands and eyes. Should look out for obstacles and traffic violation. Keep away from buoys. You get very unhappy people who maintain the course if you snag buoys and break them off with a propeller. And you can reach a situation if the buoy catches in the rudder, that you get stuck, and you could get stuck in a place which is uncomfortable. It could be in the middle of the course, and crews are coming down towards you, and so forth. So be careful of the buoys. Keep an eye on the crews during the progression of the race and inform the umpire of concerns. If the umpire is deeply concerned about crews in front of the umpire, then you can also, and there's crews behind us, then you can also look behind to make sure that none of them have had turned over or anything else. Observe all hand signal requests from the umpire, and listen to the radio should the umpire be called. The umpire's pilot radio procedure. This also applies to the assistant starter with the electronic timing. So you need to be in control of the radio at the start of the race. You announce the race, which is race number, crew status. So that's all present, scratchings, did not start, yellow cards, etc. The umpire's name and number, and change to channel 2. You announce again on channel 2. I'd say you don't need to announce all of these details on both channels. If aligning is taking a lot of time, announce stand down, and then announce flag up, or when the start is imminent again. And then, very important, hold the radio open to transmit the start to the finish tower. So this is what we were talking about earlier. You're moving to the start. You have to stop here, so 300 to 500 meters before the race coming down to you. Turn off and idle off the course. When following a race, your wake doesn't come horizontally directly out of the boat. It takes time to get there. So you can see the wake here allows you some latitude in terms of moving ahead of crews. Obey the principle. If you're following another motorboat, keep 100 meters between yourself and it. And if there are two boats approaching each other, both craft yield to starboard. So that's the standard rule. If the boats are on a diagonal collision course, the boat that has its the clashing boat on a starboard beam is the one that yields. Okay, for the capsized rowing boat, notify rescue, count the heads, abandon your race, attend to rescue if necessary, approach carefully, disengage the propeller, dive in if necessary, use the umpire's boat to stabilize the rowing boat while the crew gets in. Objection at the end of the race. You use a raised hand to indicate, or you'll see a raised hand to indicate to the umpire. The hand needs to be kept up until noticed. The umpire will make a decision based on the water and communicate with the POJ. Penalties. So a reprimand, a yellow card. This is valid for the upcoming race only. Still applies if the race is re-rowed, and this can be for violation of traffic rules, later start, dress code, etc. Exclusion means that crew is removed from the event. That could be because it misses the start, it gets 2 yellow cards, or clashes during the race. Disqualification is the removal of the crew from all events. That's for flagrant or intentional violation of the rules, or false declaration of name, classification, or club membership. And relegation to last place is due to an underweight boat. So now let's look in the last few minutes at the rules of racing. Okay, so we've got 4 crews. They're approaching the finish, and purple has moved into blue's lane like this. What is likely to happen? What is likely to happen is that we're going to get a clash. And the minute we get a clash, what happens is that these inside oars cannot move, but because of the adrenaline pumping in the boats, these rowers who've got the outside oars will continue to row, and then that will make the clash worse. And and these 2 boats will become completely entangled and stop. Okay. So in this situation, what should purple do? And what purple should do is to stop rowing. Purple should avoid this clash at all possible. Okay, and we'll see that in a moment. There is no upside for purple to create a clash here. If purple avoids the clash, purple might still be able to win the race. If purple causes a clash and impedes blue, purple's best chance is to finish second. Certainly cannot win the race and might well end up being excluded from the race. So if you're a crew and you're out of your water, your best strategy is to avoid the clash. What can the umpire do? Well, the umpire can also take action to avoid the clash. Umpire can say, purple, stop rowing. It's much better if the umpire at this stage has probably warned the crew to move over, and that's not happening. The umpire should tell the crew to stop rowing. They won't always listen, but it's in purple's best interest to stop rowing. Stop rowing is a very powerful tool in the umpire's arsenal. It's much better to avoid the clash. It avoids all sorts of politics and issues and recriminations later. So Owen went through this last week. So if we've had an incident and there's been an objection, or the umpire has decided to take action after the finish, the first thing to ask is, has a crew been disadvantaged? If no crew hasn't been disadvantaged, well, then you've got a regular race, nothing for the umpire to do. Has a disadvantage affected the ranking of the obstructed crew? No, then we just confirm the result. If it has affected the ranking of the obstructed crew, then we exclude the offending crew. Does this exclusion restore the chances of the obstructed crew? Yes, then we confirm the result. If not, then we've got to re-row those crews whose ranking has been affected. So let's look at this again. Blue and purple clash. What happens if the finish order is purple, blue, red, green? So in this case, has the clash affected the finishing order? Yes, it has. Has the blue crew been disadvantaged? Yes, it has. So then we exclude purple. Okay, and that gives us the result blue, red, green. Okay. What happens if the finish order is green, purple, blue, red? So again, there has been a clash that has affected the finishing order. So purple is excluded. If we exclude purple, then we've got a finishing order of green, blue, red, which is still not right. So it should have been blue who finished first. So then we have to have a re-row. And who would we re-row? Well, all the crews, blue and all the crews that finished in front of it. So that's blue and green. Okay. Then what happens if the finish order is green, red, purple, blue? Then we have the same situation. Purple is excluded. Blue still doesn't win the race. So then we have to re-row blue and green. So if the finishing order is blue, purple, green, red, so now we have a situation, has a crew been impeded? Yes. Has it affected the result? No, it hasn't, because blue has still won. Here purple can finish second, which is the best they can hope for, as we said before. Green and red, that's their standard positioning. So the bottom line is purple should avoid a clash at all costs. Okay, so let me finish there. Just take any questions that you might have.
Okay, I've got a question for you.
Sure, go ahead.
Would you be able to go back to the previous slide?
Which one? Dealing with what?
With the clashes, with blue and purple clash.
Okay. Right, so which situation?
So we had a situation on the weekend where there were 4 boats in the race. The red boat fell very far behind. The blue boat moved over into the red boat's lane. We left it because there was no issue and no obstruction. Then with 250 meters to go, the purple boat went into the blue boat's lane. So now they've both left their lanes. If they have a clash in the last 100, who gets excluded? Because now they've both left their lanes and lost protection.
Yeah, so excellent question, Nick. The answer is that a crew that has left its lane loses the protection of the umpire. Okay, so both blue and purple live by their accidents if they're both out of their lane. So,
okay, but if they both stop and the green boat then proceeds to win the race, how would you handle that?
That's fine. Again, purple and blue have lost the protection of the umpire because they have left their water. Okay, and then they live by their own accidents.
Cool, that's perfect. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Okay. Now, I have had a situation at Buffalo many years ago where we had exactly that. Purple and blue left their lanes, and they clashed just before the finish line. And this red boat here, ponderous as it was, eventually caught up and stopped because of this clash in front of them. And as the umpire, fortunately they didn't object, but as the umpire, I wasn't really, in theory, they were impeded, but they were just so far behind that it would have been a travesty to have let it happen. So I just let it go. Yeah, Gordon, you've got your hand up.
Oh, thanks, Gary. I guess part B question is what happens if blue tries to come back into their lane and purple's there then?
Yeah. So, yeah. So this one is one that I'm going to bat to you because I've heard different answers to it, and you've hopefully researched it in more depth than I have. My gut tells me that once you've lost the protection of the umpire, you've lost it. But I have had a FISA umpire tell me that no, if blue comes back into their lane, then they can retain the right to the water, and you've got to tell purple to move. So yeah, I'm going to ask you what your opinion is.
Hey, no pressure then. Huh? I should have kept my mouth shut. No, I for me, I think if blue tries to come back into their lane, they're trying to restore the race back to the way it should be. And so therefore purple needs to move out of blue's water. I think it becomes an interesting problem though of what happens if blue is part in red and part in blue's lane, but I guess like you get into all sorts of scenarios. But I think blue is entitled to come back to their water and take their right. And I think whether it's with 2,000 meter racing or boat race, that's the one thing they both share in common. They're entitled to their own water.
Yeah. Yeah, I think boat race is clearly is clearly the case. What I would say here, if blue has moved into this lane, it's not in blue's interest to steer back this way, actually. Yeah, the shortest distance between where they are and the finish line is a straight line to the finish line and not a curved line that comes this way. So, it's in blue's best interest not to try and come back into this water in buoyed racing. But in boat race it's a slightly different situation.
Craig, can I suggest we park that question and get an official consensus answer on that one and put it as the next exam question?
Yeah, that's up to you. That's beyond my pay grade.
Yeah.
Renelle?
So I just I think I might have answered a call when Gordon typed that answer about Buffalo and getting unfair advantage, because one of the coxes asked now at the mile regatta if they have clear water, can they change lanes? Because it wasn't sure if which side was faster. But so Gordon, I don't know if you commented or just typed, but so at Buffalo you can't, because people definitely change lanes if they are ahead to get into a faster lane at Buffalo. So you're saying they're not allowed to?
So I put it in the chat. I was using it as an example, but no, your lane is your lane, and you cannot gain an unfair advantage by going across. That's why we have the Fairness Committee. The Fairness Committee is supposed to restore the best lanes to those that qualified highest, for example. And yes, I know that people go across the travelator. I think it's lane 1 or 2, depending on the current. But no, technically, you're not allowed to leave your lane and gain an unfair advantage.
But if you are the umpire then, and they are not going to cause a clash, would you then speak to, I mean, like, I'm just practically, would you let it go, or would you tell them to move, and if they don't listen, you disqualify them or exclude them?
So practically, I think you have to judge whether it has an influence on the result of the race. It's
Okay.
it's that same. I think Craig showed it. What do you call it? It's like questions that you must ask. Did
Yeah,
it
yeah.
influence the race? Did it influence the outcome of the results? Like those sort of questions. And if the answer is yes, you follow the same protocol. If they won because they got an unfair advantage in a wrong lane, you are within your rights to exclude them. Obviously, you should be proactive and you should move them back to their lane and you should
because
try
you
and
can't
restore the
do it at
chances.
the end. Yeah. And if they
But
were
yeah,
far ahead, they probably would have won anyway.
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Evelyn? You're on mute, Evelyn.
Didn't want to unmute. Okay, there we are. Sorry, Gordon, won't you just clarify for them also the difference between Buffalo, where you have 6 lanes of straight water rowing, where like a boat race, where you have the difference getting clear water and being able to move over, and the difference between if it's lanes. You can just clarify the difference between that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this whole thing is focused on the 6-lane racing, and 6-lane racing says you can't leave your lane and gain an unfair advantage. Boat race, both South African schools and the South African universities says that if you get clear water, you can do whatever the hell you like. But I think rather focus on the 6 lanes, which is you may not leave your lane to gain an unfair advantage.
Okay, we don't seem to have any more questions, so I'll hand it back to you, Justin.
Thank you very much, Craig, and thank you to Dylan. Really interesting, and really appreciate you putting the effort into everything that you've done, and then also the support from the likes of Evelyn and Gordon and Rory, etc. I mean, I think the most important thing that's come out of this is be fair. When you're on the water, fairness is what it's all about, and be fair to each other. And if you're not sure, you're always able to consult others around you. But also, don't be afraid to make a decision on the water. You are the umpire in charge, and you are there to make a decision, and be gutsy about doing it. So thank you to everybody for joining us this evening, and thank you very much for obviously to Craig and to Dylan for taking us through that. I think it's been very useful.
Yeah, thanks very much, guys. And just to end it off, there's a quick quiz that we've put together on Gordon's new Sarok platform. So if you can just click on that link and pick the practical approach to on-water duties quiz and see if we can get some better results than last week.
I hope he wasn't using Amazon services.
I don't know, Gordon. Is it Amazon hosted?
It's not Amazon hosted, thankfully.
Wonderful. Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great
night. Thanks very much, Craig. Thanks, Dylan.
Sorry, Rory, which one is it? There's 2. Is it so? There's a practical approach to on-water duties.
That's the one we're doing today. The umpire refresher was last week's quiz. And just for all of those who got it wrong, because I think it was about 95% in last week's quiz, only the aligner can call a false start, not the start.
Yes, I would have got that one.
Cool.
Well done. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Bye.